Story 1. I was 24, living back home in a quiet Denver suburb, when my older brother asked me to stay overnight with his kids while he and his wife went to a black tie event downtown. Lily was 7, sensitive, big eyes, always asking if the doors were locked. Max was 10, mouthy but sweet underneath. I'd babysat them dozens of times. Their 2-story house felt like an extension of my childhood. Routine stuff, leftover stir-fry for dinner, no horror cartoons, bedtime by 9:30. My sister-in-law reminded me Lily sometimes woke up scared and might call out. She also mentioned the side window in the laundry room sometimes stuck and didn't latch properly if you didn't jiggle it just right. But she swore she'd fixed it that morning. They left at 6:30. We ate in the den, laughed through a Pixar movie. Upstairs at 9:15. Lily begged for the hall light on and her door cracked. Max just grunted goodnight and rolled over. Downstairs, I dimmed the lights, put on a muted basketball game, texted friends. Normal Friday, around 9:50, light footsteps overhead. I figured Lily needed water. Halfway up the stairs, I saw her standing at the railing in her unicorn pajamas, looking down at me with confusion. "Uncle Alex, you just came in my room and said it's okay. Go back to sleep. Why did you leave again?" My skin prickled. "Sweetie, I haven't been upstairs since bedtime." She frowned, thinking I was teasing. I walked her back anyway, checked under the bed, in the closet, nothing but stuffed animals and shadows. She settled but kept glancing at me like she wasn't sure who I was. As I left her room, I noticed the hallway felt colder, the floorboards creaking in places they usually didn't. Back on the couch, unease settled in my chest like wet cement. 20 minutes later, Max shuffled down, rubbing his eyes. "Why'd you stand by my dresser and stare at me, then walk out without saying anything?" The room suddenly felt colder. I forced calm. "I didn't, buddy. Maybe a dream?" But the similarity in their stories made my throat tighten. I told him to stay with me on the couch. Turn the TV off. Silence pressed in. Too loud. Every creak of the house sounded deliberate. I started noticing small things. The faint smell of wet leaves from outside, even though all windows were closed. A draft that shouldn't have been there. Then frantic running upstairs. Lily appeared at the top of the stairs, screaming my name, tears streaming. She flew down and crashed into me. "Someone's in my room again. Said goodnight, but the voice wasn't yours. It was wrong, too deep, like it was trying to sound like you but couldn't." Her whole body shook. Max went pale. I told him to stay put, grabbed the heavy fireplace poker from the stand, better than nothing, and started up. The upstairs hallway felt stretched, shadows deeper than they should be. Passing Lily's door, I heard breathing, slow, adult. I leaned in. A tall silhouette stood beside her empty bed. I whispered, "Hello," hoping it was nothing. A voice answered, high-pitched, forced, like a man imitating a woman. "Aren't they just the most precious little things when they're sleeping?" The words dripped with something unhinged. My blood turned to ice. The figure turned slightly, over 6'4", lanky, clothes hanging loose. He smiled, wide, wrong. His teeth caught the hall light in a way that made them look too sharp. I didn't think. I ran down, grabbed both kids. "Shoes now out!" But Lily started sobbing harder. I looked back. The man was leaning around the upstairs wall, doing slow peekaboo with his hands, head tilted like a curious animal. We bolted barefoot into the cold night, across 2 lawns to the neighbor's lit porch. They knew the kids, let us in instantly. From their window, I watched him stroll out the front door, hands in pockets, casual as if leaving his own house. He turned left into the dark street and vanished. 911 said, "Stay put, don't pursue." I regret that every day. Police arrived 25 minutes later, house empty, no forced entry. They found the laundry room window cracked open just enough for a person to slip through. The latch hadn't caught properly after all. My brother and his wife now have cameras everywhere. Inside, outside, motion lights. But sometimes when I'm alone, I still hear that voice whispering how precious we all are. And I wonder if he ever came back to check. Story 2. I'm 32 now, and though life has thrown plenty of curveballs and sleepless nights my way, nothing lodges in my mind quite like that single evening when I was 16. It was my very first legitimate babysitting job, not the casual, watch your cousin for an hour kind, but a real paid gig for people my parents knew well enough to vouch for. The kind of family where everyone assumes safety because the connection feels solid. They've given permission to tell this story, so let's call the parents Ryan and Laura and their 6-year-old son Ethan. Their home was tucked away in a quiet cul-de-sac on the outskirts of Portland. Neat lawns, glowing porch lights, neighbors who waved hello, the picture of suburban peace. Looking back, that very normalcy is what made the horror sink in so deep. Bad things aren't supposed to happen in places that feel this safe. It was a crisp Friday in mid-October, the air carrying that first real bite of fall. My mom dropped me off around 6:45 p.m. Ryan greeted me at the door with a firm professional handshake, like I was applying for a summer internship at his office. Laura pulled me into a quick hug, calling me their absolute lifesaver over and over. They were already dressed for their date night, nice clothes, cologne, excitement in the air. They walked me through the evening drill in the kitchen, dinner around 7:30, pasta and meatballs already prepped. Lights out by 8:45 at the latest. Ethan's bedroom door left cracked open just enough for him to feel connected, but not alone. If he needed the bathroom after dark, I had to walk him there. The long upstairs hallway sometimes frightened him with its shadows and echoes. Ryan made a point of showing me the back patio door. Use both locks if you ever step out there. The bottom knob lock alone can pop open if someone jiggles it hard enough. Always the deadbolt too. I nodded seriously, thinking it was basic common sense. A lock was a lock, wasn't it? They left around 7:20, their SUV's taillights disappearing down the street. The moment the garage door rumbled shut, Ethan grabbed my hand and asked if we could play hide and seek. The house felt surprisingly large once I was alone in it. Wide hallways, extra rooms branching off, plenty of places for a small boy to disappear into trouble. I gently steered him towards safer options. First, a matching card game spread out on the coffee table in the living room, then a colorful kids' racing game on the console in the den. His little cars zoomed through candy-colored worlds, collecting stars, completely invincible. It was easy, fun even. By 8 o'clock, I heated up the pasta. Ethan ate cross-legged on the rug in front of the TV, cartoons blaring, sauce smeared across his chin like war paint. His parents probably didn't allow dinner in front of the screen, but on my first paid night, I wasn't about to play strict rule enforcer. We laughed at the silly characters, and for a while, everything felt perfectly normal. After dinner came teeth brushing, pajamas, and the trek upstairs. Ethan's bedroom was at the far end of the wide hallway. Blue walls covered in glow-in-the-dark stars. Toy bins stacked neatly. A sliding door closet with mirrored panels, and a tall wicker laundry hamper tucked into the corner beside his dresser. A soft orange nightlight plugged into the outlet cast warm, flickering shadows across the ceiling. I read him half a chapter from his favorite pirate adventure book, voices and all, until his eyelids grew heavy. As I stood to leave, he whispered, "Stay in the hall for a minute, okay? Just until I'm asleep." I leaned against the door frame, listening to him rustle under the covers, fidget with his stuffed fox, then finally go still. Door cracked, as promised. Laura had pointed out the guest room just down the hall, Closer to the stairs, small but comfortable, with a modest TV, an armchair, and a thick quilt that looked like it had never been slept under. I kicked off my shoes, flopped onto the bed, turned on a mindless sitcom for background noise, and started scrolling my phone, texting friends about how easy the night was going. I even felt a little proud. First real job, and everything was under control. That feeling lasted maybe 45 minutes. Then came the soft patter of footsteps in the hallway. Too light for an adult, unmistakable for a child. I looked up. Ethan stood in the doorway, clutching his fox, eyes wide and glassy with fear instead of sleepiness. My heart gave a quick thud. "What's wrong, buddy?" I asked, sitting up. He hesitated on the threshold, glancing back down the dark hall like something might follow. Then whispered, "Jamie, they're scratching in my closet, like claws." I tried to keep my voice steady. Houses make noises, especially old ones. Settling beams, wind in the vents, pipes shifting. But the way his lower lip trembled made my stomach clench. Memories of my own childhood, monster under the bed nights, flooded back. I couldn't just brush him off. "Okay, let's go check it together." We padded back down the hall. I flipped on every light switch, slid the closet door open slowly. Inside, hanging clothes, stacked bins, a few forgotten toys. I pushed hangers aside dramatically, even crouched to peer into the corners. "See? Nothing here." Relief washed over his face. I tucked him in again, kissed his forehead, left the door cracked. 20 minutes later, faster footsteps this time, almost running. He burst into the guest room, tears already starting. "Jamie, the door moved! It opened by itself!" A flicker of annoyance crossed my mind. Was he playing games to keep me close? But his pale cheeks and shaking hands killed it instantly. We returned. The sliding panel was pushed all the way to one side, gaping open like a mouth. My throat tightened. I'd closed it firmly. The track was stiff. It didn't glide on its own. Ethan swore up and down he hadn't touched it, his voice cracking with sincerity. I slammed it shut harder than necessary, gave him a stern, "no more tricks" look, and put him back to bed. Walking back to the guest room, I found myself listening intently. Every creak, every distant car outside sounded suspicious. The hallway felt longer, the shadows thicker. I told myself to stop being ridiculous. This was a safe neighborhood, safe house, safe kid. 15 more minutes. No footsteps now, just Ethan's voice calling out, shaky and small, trying not to cry too loud. "Jamie, please come." I jumped up and ran. He was sitting upright in bed, tears streaming, finger pointing to the corner. The hamper was there, same as always. But behind it, crammed into the impossibly tight space between the basket and the wall, was a man, crouched low. Black sleeve over his shoulder, scuffed work boots, half his face visible, and those eyes, unblinking, patient, staring straight at me, like he'd been waiting hours for this exact moment. Time stretched, my brain short-circuited for a heartbeat, denial, confusion, terror all at once. Then instinct took over. I didn't scream. I lunged forward, scooped Ethan into my arms. He felt so small, so light. And back toward the door, eyes never leaving that corner. The man stayed perfectly still, as if hoping we'd convince ourselves he wasn't real. We bolted to the guest room. I kicked the door shut, fumbled the lock, pressed my body against it while Ethan buried his face in my neck, sobbing quietly. Phone out, 911. There's an intruder in the house, in the child's bedroom, hiding right now. We're barricaded upstairs. The operator was calm. I was not. Every tick of the clock felt like a countdown. I kept waiting for the knob to turn, for pounding, for anything. Sirens finally approached, sweetest sound I'd ever heard. Police swept the lower floor first. Front door wide open. They searched closets, under beds, attic, garage, nothing. He'd slipped out the moment we ran, down the stairs and gone. When Ryan and Laura pulled up to police cars and flashing lights, the house filled with a mix of shock, fear, and overwhelming relief. Ryan went straight to the patio door. Deadbolt untouched, bottom lock only partially engaged. "I specifically said both," he murmured, voice tight with disappointment. Guilt hit me like a punch, but he pulled me into a hug afterward, voice thick. "You got him out. You saved my boy." To this day, years later, I sometimes wake up in the middle of the night convinced I hear soft footsteps in my own hallway. Slow, deliberate, patient. And the question that never leaves me: how long had that man been inside the house before Ethan's first scratching noise? Waiting, watching, planning. Story 3. At 19, I was still taking babysitting jobs for extra cash. Ben's mom was a single parent, worked long hours, described him as independent and quiet. Code for won't bother you much. The first 2 times were easy. He stayed in his room playing violent video games, barely spoke. The 3rd time she called in a panic. Overnight stay, conference out of town, no one else available. I said yes. More money, same kid, easy night. Their apartment was in a working class part of Atlanta. 3rd floor, secure building, nothing fancy. She rushed out instructions at 4 p.m. Frozen pizza, cereal for breakfast, guest room at the end of the hall. Ben was already upstairs. I called up. He yelled, "Yeah," without coming down. For hours, I heard muffled gunfire and car engines through the ceiling. Once I checked, he sat cross-legged, eyes glued to the screen. Didn't even glance when I asked if he was hungry later. But I noticed something odd. On his desk was a drawing of a stick figure holding what looked like a knife, standing over another figure in a bed. I told myself it was just a kid's drawing, maybe from a game. At 7:30, I called him for dinner. He came down silently, took 2 slices, shot me a look, flat, almost resentful, and went back up without a word. I stood in the kitchen holding my plate, feeling like an intruder in a house I was paid to control. After cleaning, I went to the guest room, small, bare, single bed. I left the door half open. Clothes felt wrong. Sat texting friends, scrolling memes, trying to shake the odd vibe. Around 9:30, I went to the kitchen for water and noticed the knife block on the counter. 1 slot empty. The steak knife was missing. I looked around, shrugged it off. Maybe he'd taken it to cut something earlier, and put the block back in place. But the unease lingered. Around 10:15, I felt watched. Looked up. Ben's head slowly withdrew from the door crack. Heart jumped. "Hey, what's up?" No answer. Soft footsteps retreated. I laughed it off. Nosy kid. But the laugh sounded thin in the quiet apartment. Midnight, I turned off the lamp, tried to sleep. The apartment was quiet except distant traffic. Then the feeling returned. Heavy, close. I opened my eyes. Dark shape at the foot of the bed. I yelped, scrambled for the light. Ben stood there, motionless, face blank, but eyes wrong, annoyed, regretful, both hands behind his back. "Ben, what the hell?" No answer. "Show me your hands." He shook his head once, slow. That terrified me more than shouting would have. I slid out of bed, approached carefully, grabbed his arm, turned him. The knife, big chef's knife, gleamed in his grip, the blade catching the lamplight. I screamed, clamped my hand over my mouth. "Get out! Go! Now!" He ran into the hall, still holding it. I slammed and locked the door, hands shaking so badly I could barely dial his mom. She answered on the second ring. I choked out what happened. Long silence. Then her voice cracked. Apologies. Horror. I was afraid something like this might... She wouldn't finish. Said she'd call her brother to come immediately. I stayed barricaded almost an hour, listening for footsteps, for the knob. When the uncle arrived, he went straight to Ben's room. I grabbed my stuff, left without looking back. She Venmo'd the money that night with a long message begging forgiveness. Said Ben had episodes she thought were under control. I never asked what kind. I never babysat again. And sometimes I still wonder if that drawing on his desk was a warning or a plan.